Welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast.
Hey all, welcome to yet another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. We have a very special guest. They're all special, but this one's pretty cool. National, world, international champion at judo, Jimmy Pedro. Also, I just realized that you are the owner of Fuji Mats. I see the shirt on you all the time, so I did a little reading. So you used to work with the company, now you own it.
Correct. So I started at another mat company for a lot of years, and then I left that company and went into the gi business with Fuji. And then the folks I used to work at the other mat company asked me if I would start a mat division, and I had a 1 year non-compete with the other brand. So 1 year was up. I said, why not? And so the head of sales and the product guy from the other company joined me, and we started our own brand, Fuji Mats. So we used the database and customers of Fuji Sports that were very loyal to us, and we helped them design and outfit their martial arts studios. And today, 8 years later, I would say we're the leading brand in the BJJ grappling space. You know, we're affiliated with all the biggest and best events. We're building the nicest gyms, and we have the most experienced sales team, helping people, achieve their dreams and make a super nice studio. Yeah.
I see your stuff everywhere. I get to travel around, and I definitely see your stuff everywhere. I'll probably come back to that, talk some more about that. So most people know you because you're an Olympian. You won some medals in the Olympics. You coached some very famous fighters and judo practitioners. You wrestled, right? You were a wrestler. You went to Brown University, I believe, if I did my homework, and you grew up in Mass. Is that right?
Yeah, I was a Mass kid, born and raised since I was a little boy.
Funny.
We talk different.
I'm from Chicago, so everybody that's not from Chicago, they always think I talk funny. So
very hard to hear.
Hard. How do you say water?
Water.
Yeah, I got a buddy from Maryland. He says water. And what the hell are you asking me for, man? Write it down. That's funny. So, big picture. How does a guy make it to the Olympics? Who is Jimmy Pedro? Let's start with the high level stuff, and then I want to dig in a little bit and unpack, and I ask you some random stuff that maybe hasn't been questioned before or posed as questions before.
So I'd say how I got there is really a tribute to my father. Okay, so my dad was my judo coach. He was my instructor. He's the one that introduced me to the sport. He's the one that lit the Olympic fire under me. He was somebody who started judo later in life. He started at age 19. He tried to pursue the Olympics himself. He fell in love with the sport of judo. Never made it, competed in the Olympic trials, competed in the national championships, but never made the Olympic Games himself. And ever since I was a little boy, I watched the games with my dad on TV, and, I just saw his eyes light up when the Americans would win medals. And he talked about the Olympics and how aspirational it would be if somebody from our school or academy ever went to the Olympics. And so he's the one that lit that fire for me. And he's also the one that gave me the tools, to get to the Olympics. He really guided me and steered me in my career. He pushed me really, really hard. I've got a kind of a drill sergeant for a father, somebody that's no nonsense, tells you like it is. Whether you just won the biggest event in the world or not, he's going to critique you. He's going to tell you what you did wrong and what you got to do better for next time, and just never kind of let me settle as to where I was, but always push me to the next level, compete at the harder events, stay for training camps, grind, taught me work ethic, taught me, everything I have in my toolbox. And then he's also a coach who realized that he could only take me so far. Right? Because technically he was only so good. So, most coaches keep their good athletes to themselves. My father just sent me around the world, sent me around the country first to the best coaches in the country so that I could learn from them and also be around people who made it to the Olympic Games, right? People who were Olympians. And me getting to know them, getting to work out with them, challenge myself against them, gave me the belief that I could do it. And then once I got to that level, he sent me to all the best international training camps and international guys to learn from. and my judo just got, just took off to all new levels. So it's really a tribute to my father.
That's fantastic. Is he still with us?
He is. He's 77 years old. He's also a big reason why the U.S. team had such success when I was the Olympic coach, because he was my assistant coach who went on the road with the kids all the time, who had the time to dedicate to the kids and the team, and spent a lot of time doing work that, I couldn't do because I had to make a living for my family. And he was retired from sport. And I knew that we had the same mentality, the same, we have the same beliefs in terms of what you need to be successful.
You guys still scrap around at all?
No.
No.
No, me and my dad.
Not even just hand fighting a little bit? No.
No such thing.
No such thing. It's always gonna go. Somebody's getting slammed on the kitchen floor.
At the end of the day, when he's 77, and it stopped pretty much when I made the Olympic team. Once I was an Olympian and I reached that status and that level, judo's a sport. When you get to a certain age, your body just can't take the abuse that any sport dishes out. It's just too physical of a sport. It's kind of like wrestling. There's not a lot of old guys that still stay in the sport of wrestling. It's just too painful.
Sure. You said a minute ago, Dad started late. He was 19. To most people, being a teenager, walking into a gym or a dojo, 18, 19 years old is when they start. Why would that be old for judo?
I think judo's a feel sport, and you need a lot of time to develop a feel for the game and understand the mechanics, and there's so many patterns that you need to learn that have to become instinct for you to truly be a technician in the game. And when you're competing against kids that have done it since they're 5, 6, 7 years old, they've got 12 years of that feel because that's all they've done their whole life. It is hard to catch up to those people. In judo, most
like a
people
language.
What's that? Yeah, exactly.
Like a language,
and so my dad's patterns were more like mechanical patterns, right? That he learned, but they weren't innate. He didn't have that feel. He turned it into a physical battle, right? He could lift weights. He could be in great shape. He could be strong. He could be powerful. And he tried to make up for the technique with training and methodology, and and he did well. I mean, he was second place in the national championships. He competed in the Olympic trials 2 times. So he was one of the best, 5 to 8 athletes we had in the country, but he got beat out by the guys that had done it since they were young, in old age, ended up catching up to him, and he had to move on.
How old were you when you started?
I literally started judo really the day I could walk, right? I mean, I was running around the mats as a toddler, with my diaper on, just kids who didn't have a partner would wrestle with me and joke with me and throw me on the floor and do stuff. But when I was 5 is when I officially started having to go to class 3 times a week for an hour at my dad's school and do judo and being a regimented, program.
I was on a ski hill one time recently, and I was watching tiny kids, skis are this big, and mom and dad are holding them between their legs. And I was jealous because I didn't learn to ski until I was a teenager. And this little person is going to be if they stick with it, an amazing skier, because they just are learning how to walk with skis under their feet.
Right.
So I can appreciate what you're saying. How many people though end up getting out of the sport because of damage? How many years can you take getting slammed and tossed? I remember somebody tossed me once, and I don't know if it was my fault or his, but we missed the crash pad, and I freaking basically slammed into the carpeted concrete floor. My hip 18 years later still hurts, shit like that doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't. I feel my years of judo every day, in everyday life. I don't know. Hard to say. I think depending on if you're in a really competitive school with really good athletes, then it's hard to still train with those people just because they're trying to compete and they're trying to go as hard as they can. But if you go to a place like Japan where they're just free flowing and they're not using physicality and then you can do judo later and enjoy it, and you can still do it. But it is hard to take falls. Taking the falls is really takes the toll.
Talk about that a little bit. So I was in a jiu-jitsu gym last night where it was more free-flowing, gentle, let's touch hands and move around, flow roll, I guess. And then I've been in other gyms where there's blood on the mat every 5 minutes. Do you still train like that? Are you still flowing around, moving around? Because you're what, about 50?
Yeah, I'm 53.
Okay. So
So I
no
don't.
judo at all?
I teach. I get my uchikomis in and my repetitions, teaching kids, teaching clinics, doing seminars. But I don't. If I grab a kid who's 12 or 14 or something like that, I'll work out with them or something. But just the bigger, stronger guys that just the competitive nature in you is like you're going to go hard, right? And the other kid's trying to test you too. And what ends up happening is the judo is a very explosive, powerful sport, and it requires those fast twitch muscles and fibers to go if you're actually going to be competitive. What I find out, what happens is, I end up tearing something. It'll be I actually tore my hamstring. Story was with the U.S. team, and we were overseas in a country in Azerbaijan, and it was our best 5 athletes in the world that we had at the time. You had to be top 16 in the world to compete in this tournament. We had 5 people in the top 16, and I was there with the team coaching them at that event. And the number one, and we did an hour workout together, and I was 42 years old, and I was good sweat going. At the end of practice, we bowed out and we were ready to leave. And the number 1 player from Mongolia in the world was there. And he said, "Hey, Sensei," he bowed. He said, "Can we do randori? Would you like to randori with me?" And I was like,
what does that mean for the rest of us?
which is sparring, right? Do you want to like spar, right? And I was like, oh, I'd love to. This guy's the best guy in the world right now in my weight class that I used to compete at 15 years ago. Why
Except
not?
how old was he, Jimmy?
He was in his like early to mid 20s, so probably 24 years old or something.
Prime of his physical life.
Correct. And I'm 42. I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome, right? Because the guy has a really awkward Mongolian type style, come around your back and pick you up with all these lifts and stuff. And so in the team, they're all young kids too. They're in their 20s, and they're like, all right, Sensei, let's go, right? So
yeah, coach, tear him up.
Right, I'm working out with this guy, and I came in a Tai Otoshi, a body drop technique, and I kind of tweaked my hamstring a little bit, right? And I felt it right away. So I kind of like stretched a little bit. I said, all right, let's go. Let's go some more. And again, I came in that same throw again because the opportunity was there. But this time when I came in, I actually tore my hamstring. And it's just like, I just dropped to the floor. It was only maybe like a minute and a half or 2 minutes. We're going with this guy, and I just popped my hamstring. And the athletes had to like put me around their arms and like hobbled me all the way back to the hotel. And I just laid in bed the whole night with ice on it. And my whole leg was full of blood the next day. And I had to hobble around the tournament and try to coach all of our guys injured. So after that day, going at the highest level was really not in the cards anymore, because that took a long time to get over.
Is that I probably know the answer, but I want to hear what you got to say. Is that a hard pill to swallow for a guy that's walked on the mats with the best in the planet to now have to just watch?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Does that ever go away?
It does, because now it's not just like a hamstring. Now it's a shoulder, it's a pec. I mean, when you get older, it's time where you just can't do certain things anymore. You're meant to teach. I mean, just a couple of months ago, I was with my daughter somewhere, and she said, Dad, she was online with some kid, and she said he was a wrestler. And I said, oh, when I get home, him and I are going to go in the garage, right? Just joking around. He's a teenage kid. She goes, well, show him a push-up. Well, I did one push-up, and it hurt my shoulder a little bit. And I went to bed, woke up the next day, didn't think anything of it. And then I looked in the mirror, and I had tore my bicep doing that one push-up. And I noticed it because if you can see, I've got a hole here in my bicep. That it was from doing one push-up.
How long ago was that?
That was like 3 or 4 months ago. It just tore off the bone, and that's just the way it was, and you get to be a certain age, your body has too many miles on it. It just can't keep doing and pushing itself to that level.
How long ago did that happen?
Like 3 or 4 months ago.
Any surgery or anything like that? Or
no, I'm not in pain. I don't have any pain. It doesn't bother me. I still have range of motion to do everything else. So
I've got this idea that I kind of communicate with to our students. So I train firearms. That's what like my main business is. And we do some combative stuff. But like my goal with firearms is we're learning to protect ourselves should we need this thing. And I always challenge people to study a legitimate martial art, jiu-jitsu, judo, boxing, etc. But if like we destroy ourselves in the endeavor to protect ourselves, kind of like the whole thing is a circle jerk and we're not doing any of it. And I lost all the feeling in this hand about 3 months ago. Super stupid, end of a class. I'm a guest at a friend's school, and the coach is like, come on, let's kind of like your story. Let's roll around a little bit. He's 25 years younger than me. And we were going real light, and I could feel him ramping up, because I think it wasn't going as he thought it would. And
Yeah.
he snapped me down so hard into a triangle, and I propped up to defend it. And at the same time that I was loose for a second as I was expanding my chest, he caught the back of my head and broke me
Oh,
down and just like with all of his might clamped down with that triangle. And I'm like, all right, I tapped out of it. And I stood up and I'm like, God dang, like, man, I think I pulled something. Well, I ended up rupturing a freaking disc in my
oh,
neck. And so 3 months of like little sleep. I've lost 2 inches in my right arm because I couldn't even use the arm, lost the use of the pec. And I got just my dominant hand. So now I'm sitting with like a little rubber band,
mhm.
trying to like gain mobility and strength back. And it's coming back. But you think about just in agreement with your story, I thought about it. I'm like, all right, what could I have done different? I could have said no. Or like, I remember the exact moment that it started to ratchet up. I could have metered my own movement, but I matched his and I didn't have to. Like 22-year-old Mickey came out and I hurt myself. He didn't hurt me. I hurt myself, but
It's the competitive nature in us that doesn't allow us. If you're a competitor, right, and you're being challenged, you're never going to back down. Doesn't matter how tired you are. Like there's always a fight in the dog, right? So, or yeah. So
I gotcha.
I know exactly what. So I had a similar injury to yours, a little bit more severe, and I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of. I got thrown on my head when I was 21 years old, right on the top of my head. I didn't want to lose the match. The Russian threw me straight down. I stuck my head out. It compacted my discs, and I finished the fight. I ended up losing. When I came home on the plane, the disc had bulged out in because of the pressure on the plane. The disc had really bulged out and hit my spine almost, and my right side of my body like just went dead.
Shut down.
It went shut down for 6 months. Pins and needles from my neck to my fingers, all the way down my tricep. So Mickey, like 30 years
That is
ago,
scary.
30 years, I thought I was paralyzed or I was going to be paralyzed. The doctors after the MRI told me, you'll never do sports again. We just want to help you become a normal human being where you can have full
Where you
function.
can brush your teeth. Yeah.
Yeah, in like I literally slept with my chin stuck to my chest, my arm, I couldn't move from here. And that's I slept for like 3 months sitting up in a chair in pain, just with no feeling in the right arm. So like you, I lost full use of my right arm, my full use of my chest and my pec muscle. Everything shrank to zero. I couldn't do
Wow.
a single push up. I couldn't even
Same thing,
extend
man.
I couldn't even extend my arm on my own. I had to like push it
Same.
up, and
Same.
I couldn't lay flat in a bed. Like everything bothered me all the time, and it just
Damn.
for whatever reason, God, luck, whatever you want to call it, youth, my body over time sitting in a traction machine and just pulling my neck all the time, taking some anti-inflammatories and just giving it time. 6 months, it started to slowly come back. The feeling came back, and I think the nerve regenerated, to be honest with you. But my whole
Full
life,
full full use.
full use of everything, except I still had a hole. I still have a hole today in my pec muscle that's not fully healed, and I still have like weakness, like no real definition of the right tricep. So anytime I bench or anything, my left arm always goes and my right arm trails it behind. It's still weaker because your body compensates. But I mean, I still went on and competed in 4 Olympic Games after that. I still won world titles. I was still able to be a competitor, but I had almost lost everything.
Did you have or do you now all these years later have any fallout from that? Are you having any symptoms? I'm sure you've had other MRIs if you're competing at that level. Do they ever see anything later?
Just a lot of anytime they do an X-ray of my neck or anything, they just see the arthritis. They can't. They say it looks like a 90-year-old person's neck.
Bro, I was watching some highlights of your stuff, and I was just like, oh my God, like get all that neck stuff that you guys were doing to each other and those slams. Even when you were on top, the stuff that would happen in those tussles and tumbles, I'm like, how are these people not paralyzed? I'm sure you've seen some gnarly injuries.
Believe it or not, it's one of those things, right? It's kind of like watching a gymnast at the Olympic level. You watch those gymnasts do quadruple flips and twists and tumbles, and you're like, holy crap. Very, very few injuries because the body is so hard. It's so professional. It's so trained. It's instinct to take those falls, and very rarely do you see people get injured at the highest level of competition because it's two athletes that have like extreme control over their bodies, the movements, the positions, and their body's hardened by everything. And I really, at the highest level, you don't really see many injuries at all. Where the injuries happen is when you've got a skilled person against an unskilled person. It's usually the unskilled person that hurts the person with skill because they do something stupid, jump on a leg and take out a knee or do some crazy thing that you're not expecting to come. And that's usually where, the injuries happen, but very rarely at the highest levels.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. How was it? So you wrestled in college?
I did.
How was it wrestling as a guy that had practiced judo for so many years? Did you have to stop yourself from doing judo moves on guys?
No, I mean, I used all my judo moves in wrestling all the time, right? I mean,
yeah,
a lot of, foot sweeps, inside trips, kochigari, leg picks. I mean, I back in that day, you could grab the legs in judo and score and pick somebody up.
Okay.
So judo was a lot more similar to wrestling than it is today. But I mean, I pretty much wrestled just to stay in shape and have good competition in my area. There wasn't a lot of judo in my area, so I wrestled in high school to help me get in a good college, and help pave the way for a good education. So it worked wonderfully for that. But judo was always my first sport, and I told my college coach that when I went to Brown. I said, hey, there's certain tournaments that are coming up in the sport. I'm trying to make an Olympic team. I'm going to leave the school and go compete in France or go compete in these tournaments while I'm part of the wrestling team. And that was part of the agreement he made with me when I joined the team. So during the season, I would wrestle, every day. I'd compete in all the events. And then if a judo event happened to come up, I'd fly somewhere and I'd compete in judo. My dad used to pick me up on weekends and bring me home, and I'd train Friday, Saturday, Sunday in judo. I'd train Monday through Thursday in wrestling. And then if we happened to have a meet on a weekend, then I would just stay at school and wrestle that match that weekend. So I kind of
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about taking wrestling to a higher level?
No, I didn't. First of all, I wasn't good enough in the sport of wrestling to make it to the Olympic level. I mean, I competed Division I wrestling, Brown University. We're a top 25 team in the country. I won the Eastern Regionals, EIWAs, my junior year in college, and qualified for NCAAs. Had a great, junior year. But then when I got thrown on my head, it took me out of judo and it took me out of my senior year of wrestling. So I didn't get to wrestle my senior year in college as a result of that neck injury.
It's really a cool story. I didn't know that at all. I mean, it's not cool that it happened to you, but the fact that you came back from that and still achieved what you did is pretty amazing. I dig that. You brought something up that was in my list of questions. So you mentioned still being able to grab the legs and feet. How do you feel the Olympics has changed the martial art of judo? And do you think it's a good thing for the sport? I'm sure that's something that's talked about often. I hear guys at the gym or various places talk about that from time to time, like how the Olympics has changed, not just judo, but any sport.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, the International Judo Federation has done an amazing job of raising the level of judo in the world, like how high a level the sport has become and how prestigious the sport has become worldwide it's insane. Like, it's the number one sport in France. It's the number one sport in Japan. Like, I just came back this morning from Budapest, Hungary. I was at the World Masters competition. I was invited as a special guest. They had like a Hall of Fame dinner, and I got invited to as a special guest there this weekend. So I saw the best 32 athletes in every division compete for the World Masters title. And, the event is like, if you were at the ADCC event in Vegas this past year, like a sold out arena, think about like the Boston Garden. I sat in these box seats, watching the best in the world compete. They've got, breakfast, lunch, dinner, all catered. You've got programs, with all the pool sheets of the day and the agenda for the day. They've got the Empress from Japan at the event. They've got the Prime Minister of Israel is there. Like, they've really made it like a celebrity, high level, lots of people that own huge corporations rubbing elbows together, watching the sport that's respectful and traditional. It's amazing what they've done to elevate the game in all of the major countries in the world, with the exception of the United States. It's still a very small sport in the United States, and it hasn't generated any publicity or money yet, but that needs to change. In terms of the rules of the sport and becoming an Olympic sport, no doubt took away a lot of the self-defense aspects of judo, right? I mean, literally, you don't see any leg grabs. I mean, when in reality in a fight, if someone tries to grab your leg, you got to know how to defend that, right? I mean, you can't even touch the legs in the sport today or you get penalized. So a lot of the techniques, I think a lot of the dynamic techniques, a lot of the self-defense techniques, a lot of the applications have been removed in change for sport. And it makes the sport, I think, it's cleaner, it's nicer, but because it takes away a lot of the techniques that you can do, the variations, it can make it boring at times, where you don't see a big throw because they're limited by what they can do. If you fight a guy that's 6'9" and he turns his hip on you and you can't grab his leg, how do you throw the guy? It's really difficult to throw that because you would just grab his leg and pick him up, but you can't touch the legs. And so you're holding a guy that's taller than you and has leverage on you. And it just, I think it's, I don't like the game as much today as I did before, but I understand why they did it. And it was to differentiate judo from wrestling, differentiate judo from jiu-jitsu, to keep it as an Olympic sport and to keep it pure, where it's just about using someone's leverage against them and having a grip on the gi and trying to throw the other guy.
So I've seen, like, I'm in the locker room at a gym I'm visiting last night, and I'm listening to a couple dudes I don't know. I'm changing, and I'm just hearing them. It's a gi night. I like the gi. I like it for a lot of reasons, but these guys are all no gi jiu-jitsu guys. And they're pissed off that they got to put a gi on. And first of all, I'm thinking, well, why are you here? Why did you come here? But, they're talking all about like the street versus sport, and nobody on the street's got a gi on, and I'm chuckling because I've trained with t-shirts and sweatshirts and suit coats, and you can do all these things, and of course, like the simulation of strikes, if I can grab you, I can punch you, all that, and they don't know any of this. So to them, I'm slick and smooth, and so it's better for martial arts, right? But then I watch these guys, and they go out to the mat, and literally the one guy inverts himself. So he's on his shoulders, on his neck, with his ass up in the air, and he's like, this is how he approaches his opponent. And I'm like, a minute ago, you guys are talking about like the validity of what you're doing for self-defense. One, I'd either walk away from you if you did that because you're not a threat to me, you're on your back. But if I had to engage you, I just kick you in your ass. You're on your head. So like, I think that, I just want to hear your thoughts on it. So people go to these schools, and you'll hear, like the coach last night said, okay, if we're doing this and you're a competitor, do this. If you're not a competitor, think about this. So I think that that's a great thing. But like with judo, for example, our schools just all of those techniques just kind of being lost? You got to find some guy with hair like yours or mine to explain it to them.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, there's some schools that still allow it during practice, and they still teach traditional judo, which is all throws, all takedowns, grappling, submissions. Like, I think judo has a big misconception that it's only a feet game, right? But the sport still has, the arm bars, the chokes, the pins, just like jiu-jitsu does. And in fact, today's judo, they allow grappling, they allow the newaza, the ground part, significantly longer than they ever did before. In my day, if somebody ran out of bounds, the match would stop because you went out of bounds. Today, if you're engaging in the ground game and you're actually showing progress, they'll let you keep going out of bounds as long as you're making progress and the guy can't run. So it's kind of nice in the way that the game's changed that way. But I think you could still go to a judo school and still learn good judo, traditional judo. But if it's somebody that's just geared towards the Olympics and producing Olympic athletes, then it's going to be significantly different than what it used to be, for sure.
That makes sense. So perhaps students should start asking questions when they show up and see if the place is going to be teaching the stuff that's geared towards what their goals are.
Right. I mean, and talking about those guys that are inverting, laying on the ground, like no fight starts that way. No, first of all, if you're on concrete, why would you put yourself on your back upside down? That's going to be very, very painful to grapple.
Maybe they had a nice Fuji mat underneath them.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's a thing too, right? I mean, throws and takedowns are nice when you've got a nice mat under you, but like if you take, I don't want to slap the concrete. I don't want to like break the fall, on something hard. And I think, ultimately self-defense is right to mitigate the situation and get the hell out of there as fast as you can, right? It's not to keep the tussle going forever. It's to kind of throw somebody or knock somebody out of the way and then leave the situation, because the longer you engage, the more trouble that's going to pursue, right? Especially if friends are around or anything else. And it's to try to diffuse the situation. And look at what's happened in like the media today, where the guy choked the guy on the subway, right?
Sure.
I mean, could he have just subdued him and kind of like made him submit and just like not choked him, but then just left the situation? Like, hey, because once somebody gets, kind of humiliated in front of other people, they're not going to continue to, abuse or engage. They're going to just kind of probably scurry and run off because they don't want to be caught.
Usually. Yeah. That's a very interesting perspective. I interviewed a friend of mine, an attorney that works in that space of self-defense, not criminal law, but self-defense law. And we did a whole podcast episode on being a good person intervening like that. Like, and that's a whole nother discussion. Have you ever had to use judo to defend yourself? I mean,
Yes.
You're a famous guy in your space, but if somebody doesn't follow Olympic judo or that type of stuff, they might not recognize you. Anybody ever kick the wrong dude?
Sometimes you're forced into situations that you don't really want to be in, but you have no choice. And I was always taught that, let somebody say whatever they're going to say and just walk away. But if they actually, put their hands on you or engage physically, then you have no choice, right? So if somebody starts with you and puts you in a situation where you don't have a choice, then it's happened a number of times. I'm not proud of what happened, but
so tell me one story where somebody grabbed an Olympic judo expert and didn't realize what they were. So just a little funny way to like prep this story. I'm in Costa Rica for a jiu-jitsu camp, and there's a guy, you'd probably know him. I can't think of his name. He was a doctor for the judo team. He's from Dominica or Puerto Rico. I'll find his name and text it to you. You'd know this guy. He's probably about 60. He's a orthopedic surgeon. And we're chatting, and so we're going to drill together. And you could see he's fit as heck. And then we stand up. We're working takedowns of all things. And he puts his hand on me, and I'm like, that's not normal. Like, and I find out this guy was like somebody in judo, and he was very kind to me. But as soon as he put his hand on me, I'm like, I'm screwed. Like, as soon as he grabbed me, I'm like, I know something bad's about to happen to me and I can't stop it. And of course, we were just drilling. This wasn't a street fight, but tell me one story, just one.
Oh boy.
There's a statute of limitations.
Well, it's been over 30 years. So, and to be honest, I don't know who the guy was anyway. So, but it's not that I'm proud of, but we were in Japan at a nightclub one night, and I was with a couple of guys that were on the Olympic team with me. And I was looking for one of my friends who had left the nightclub, and he was outside jawing with some guys. And I walked outside and I saw that the situation wasn't normal, right? It kind of was escalating to a point of trouble. My friend was he was 132 pounds. He's like 5'2". And these other guys were foreign guys from Australia. And it really got to a strong verbal altercation. The two guys one guy was like 6'2". My buddy's 5'2", and he was a little Asian guy. He was a little Asian guy from Hawaii. And they got into this like jawing contest, and it started to break out into a little bit of a scuffle, a little bit of a fight. And it got broken up because he had a bunch of buddies there, and it was just me and my friend. And they said, hey, listen, it's going to be, this guy is going to go against this guy, and we're just going to let them have at it. I go, what do you mean you're going to let them have at it? There's no way you're going to let them have at it, right? So one of the guys actually smashed the beer bottle, and he lunged at my friend, and he stabbed my friend in the leg. And he actually cut his leg, and we're in the streets of Japan. And he cut my friend's leg, and but he fell forward.
Freaking Aussies.
Another kid came out who was an American and saw the guy on the ground and started kicking the guy who stabbed him in the stomach. And he was kicking him and kicking him and kicking him. And they lifted the guy up, and he stood up, and my friend's bleeding. And they said, guys, everybody break it up. Stop. We're going to let these guys finish the fight. I go, finish the fight. He just stabbed him. So I looked at that big guy and I said, you are not going to go at him again. We're going to break this up. We're done. The fight's over. We're leaving. He says, nope, you're not getting out of here without the fight. Right. And he mouthed off. And I said, you know what? I just grabbed him by the sleeve, right by the sleeve. I put my hand right by his head, and I threw him with an osotogari right there in the concrete. And he just hit the floor, and he just didn't move. And my buddy like picked up his arm and started 1, 2, he's out. And I was like, I felt bad because the guy was still out. And I looked at another guy who just came out of the bar, and he was like, he lived in Japan at the time. And he looked at me and he said, did you do that? And I go, yeah. He goes, run. I just took off. Like, there was no way. Don't stick around. Like, don't let any. I was gone. Whatever happened.
I'm not laughing. You started the story by saying you're not proud of it. I'm not taking pleasure in the fact that you had to get in a street fight, but I think it's good from time to time to remember that that's why we do this stuff, right? Of course, big picture. Don't go to a bar. Don't hang out with dirtbags. Walk away. That's like the message of my brand, but.
But at the end of the day, when I look at the guy's a scumbag who stabs somebody with the bottle, and then he still wants to fight the guy afterwards when he's bleeding. Like, there's something wrong with that guy. And to say that he's going to stand there while his 5 buddies are going to, make sure everything goes in their direction. It just wasn't.
Yeah, that would have gone south pretty quick for sure.
So
I got a group of dudes that we've got we're all coaches and teachers in some way, from martial arts to firearms. Some of them are law enforcement guys. Some of them are special operations guys. There's a group of about 20 guys. And I told them I was interviewing you. And I said, hey, you got any questions that you want me to throw at him? So a couple of them, Brandon is one of them. He's a firearms dude, really high level firearms guy, but he's also a strength and conditioning guy that specializes in a lot of stuff pertaining to like vision, balance, stuff like that. So he asked me, training outside of the actual sport, like of judo, what kind of stuff at the high level do you have your guys working on? Strength conditioning, vision, balance. You got any like special little
so yeah, actually, So actually, I'm not that I was a pioneer in it, but when I look at like today, you watch all these guys like flipping tires and using like, hitting things with sledgehammers and doing all this sort of functional strength training that they do, not just lifting barbells and stuff. So probably it was like the early 90s. I was with a strength and conditioning coach, and I actually had him review all my videos, learn the sport of judo, and he was very much a guru in strength and conditioning, right? Non-traditional strength and conditioning. So he had put together all of these exercises and all of these circuits for me that were based on a judo match. And we would, back then the match was 5 minutes, and then if it was a tie, it would go into like golden score, and there'd be a period in golden score you had to score. So all of my circuit training exercises and stuff were revolved around how it would simulate a match. So I was taking medicine balls and throwing them against trampolines and like doing one-legged pistol squats on a bench, or climbing rope, pushing the sleds, pulling the sleds like with a rope, for certain either time periods or number of reps over and over again, balancing on a medicine ball, doing squats, and like, using your whole body, because that's what judo does, right? You use your whole body when you do the sport. You don't just do squats. You're always got some balance component to the squat, or some explosive power movement that you're doing. And so I would be throwing sandballs and all of that stuff back in the 90s when I was training for the Olympics. So yes.
Did you have other competitors, other teams, other guys that you knew that looked at you like, what the heck are you doing?
Well,
Like,
every
we're just
time
sitting here in the
I had a lot of people come from all over the world come and train with me at the time, and I would bring them to the gym with me, and they'd absolutely die when they'd go through the training, because it was so exhausting. Like, when you do a really hard fight with somebody, you're blowing your lungs out so hard. Like every single muscle in your body is like tight with lactic acid, and because the match was that physical, right? So how do you emulate that in a training session? Well, this guy figured it out, with the number of times, the number of reps that I'd have to do. He knew that my forearms would be blown in the first minute doing it, but I still had to climb the rope in the fourth minute, or I still had to be as strong at the end of the match as I was at the beginning of the match. So it was really a science, and it was the closest thing. Like when I got done doing one circuit, I would lay on the ground and I would need 2 minutes to recover, because I needed my muscles to get oxygen again. And then I'd have to do a second circuit, with only 5 minutes rest. You got to start your second circuit. And I would do 4 circuits in a day, because sometimes I'd have 4 matches in a row, back to back to back like that. So that really helped me with the physical conditioning that I needed to succeed in my sport.
So what I'm hearing is you tailored your PT to help you excel at the sport. You weren't just getting stronger per se. You were getting stronger in a way which makes good sense. But I do think oftentimes we just go jog and we do deadlifts, which is all good stuff, but you really tailored it to help you excel. Did you see that you were like out gas tanking opponents? Like,
There's no doubt that training paid off and made me the athlete that I was. I mean, for my last Olympic Games, I was 33 years old. I had 7 fights at that Olympics. I was the first match of the day, and I was the second last one of the day to fight. So it was an early morning start, and it finished at the very end of the day.
So you had a whole day that you had to be ready to perform.
And at my last 4 matches, it basically, I would fight a match. I would walk around, and my break was just enough to walk around the venue and get in line to fight again. I only had like a 5 to 10 minute break, 5 to 10 minute break in between all of my fights, my last 4 fights of the day. And after and one of them went to the full time and golden score. So it was like a 10-minute fight. After winning the match, I came off. 10 minutes later, I had to be back on the mat again to fight again, to come back and win the bronze. And I think one of the guys I had to fight just kind of looked at me like, aren't you exhausted? Like, you just finished a 10-minute fight. Like right here, you're not even breathing, and you're going to fight. Like, it was something that in the training that had led me to the point where I could perform at my best, even as tired as I was.
I love it. That probably, knowing what you were capable of in the gym, probably helped give you some confidence out there too, knowing that you had some juice left. Which brings me to another question. I've interviewed other Olympians, uh, other people that are world champions. I was just with my friend JJ Ricazza the other day, whose father, JJ's a world champion pistol shooter. JJ's father was his coach, and he surpassed him. How the mental side of things look for you? Um, Lanny Basham, do you know who Lanny was or is? He's a rifle shooter in the Olympics. Wrote a lot, still does, on the mental side of winning. His famous book is With Winning in Mind. Um, and he lost some games and didn't medal, and so he went and started getting in touch with other Olympians. He's got to be in his late 70s now, and just said, like, what are you guys doing different that are winning than the guys that you're just eking out? And it was all the mental stuff. Was that a big part of your career?
Huge part of it. A huge part of what I passed on to the athletes that I worked with when I was the coach. And for me, it was something that I had to learn myself. I didn't have a specific mental coach or somebody that guided me in that direction. It was self-taught or self-learned. And, I had heard a lot about, visualization, positive thinking, mental imagery, but it wasn't until I started in my career doing it myself and that it catapulted me to become the athlete that I did become and become world champion in the sport and win a couple of Olympic medals. It just started simply for me. You have to believe you're the best before you're actually the best, right? Because if you don't think you can win before you go into the match, then it's not going to happen. So what I started doing was like, before I'd go to bed at night, I would just visualize myself like, what would it look like if Jimmy Pedro was the world champion? If I was the winner of this competition? Like, let's watch this and play it in my head over and over again. And I used to see myself step up on the podium, receive my medal, hear the national anthem, see who was on second and third place next to me. And I would live that moment in my brain enough times that when it came time to the competition, it actually was my reality. It was as if my mind had trained my body to go do what it saw before. And when I started using this over and over and over again, it started working over and over. I got to the point where I would be, before the tournament would start, I would write my name on the pull sheet all the way to be the gold medalist. And I'd write in the silver and bronze as if it was real. And I saw my name advance, and I'd picture it at night, the success, the winning, the throwing my opponent in the match or arm barring my opponent and coming off and hugging my coach and seeing my arms being raised and seeing the ref give me the win. And all of that positive mental imagery and all that visualization, I think, helped me become the world champion in the sport and helped me win and succeed at the level I did. And it was that confidence that I took, that I've seen it. I know it's possible. I just got to do it. And obviously you have to do the physical part and you have to be trained and prepared to win. But without the mental, you can't ever be the best because you don't believe it. You haven't seen it enough. You haven't convinced yourself that it can be your reality. And then I also believe in having positive, like some sort of saying, I'm invincible, I'm fearless, I'm the best in the world. I used to tell myself I was the best in the world all the time in the mirror. In between matches, you got to go to the bathroom, you're washing your hands, you see yourself in the mirror. You're the best in the world. Go show them. Let's go. Like, number one, and get some sort of like, I can do, I know I can, I'm the best kind of positivity going during the day, and then go fight like you're the best and go prove to everybody you're the best. And you can do a lot to build up your confidence just with that mental toughness, that belief, that visualization, positive self-talk. Like, all of that's a huge part of it. And if you listen to Kayla Harrison talk at all about her successes, she drank the Kool-Aid when she was younger. Like, I actually spent hours with my kids, meaning my students, about the importance of visualization, about the importance of believing yourself, about the importance of behavior and mannerism, standing tall and looking tough and feeling like you're the best and believing in yourself and nobody's better than you. And we're going to go take this thing. We're going to be warriors today. We're going to go win. I don't care how good they are. You're better than them. And it just leads into this belief in yourself that's really helps you become invincible.
How did you plug that into life and business? family, etc.
Same way, nobody's better than you. No, if you're willing to pay the price, I always believe in paying the price. The hard work's got to come first. Like, you've got to want it. You've got to do the work. You've got to believe in yourself. At the end of the day, you'll find a way. Like, there's always a way to find a way to be successful. That's the way I've approached my life. And then in addition to that, help as many people along the way that you can. I do believe it'll come back to you. So anybody that I've done business with or tried to help in life, it's never about making money. It's about helping people achieve dreams and do some good things together, cut them a break. Every time somebody reaches out and needs some help, I usually give it to them and I ask them to pay it back to me in some other way. And I think that integrity, that authenticity, that connection that you create with those people, it leads to good stuff coming back.
I dig that, man. Deeds, not words. It's easy to talk, but you got to live it. I know that you've got another appointment. I'm going to give you a chance to just final words, but how do people find you? How do they do business with you if they want to get some gym outfitted with nice cushy mats?
Well, that's easy. Fujimats.com. You can hit us up, info@fujimats.com. One of my guys will definitely get back to you, help you out. Personally, I'm Jimmy Pedro at fujisports.com. You can email me anytime. I answer everybody's email in one way, shape, or another, for sure. But my other company is fujisports.com. We do the gi and gear for athletes. We do all the custom gear for jiu-jitsu schools. Again, I've got unbelievable people that work with me and for me. We hire Olympians, world champions, brown belts, blue belts, people that live the passion, right? They do jiu-jitsu, they wrestle, they do judo, they run schools, they're in the business, and they love what they're doing. And those are the people that I've surrounded myself at my companies, and we just love helping others.
And people can follow you. I think you've got an Instagram page.
I'm Jimmy Pedro USA. JIMMYPEDRO USA is my Instagram.
I dig it. If the folks watching, listening, never get to meet you, what's something you'd leave them with? You already gave us a bunch of good advice, but what's something you'd leave them with if they never cross your way?
Find something that you're passionate about, set a goal, and believe that you can make it happen. And just like everything I've done in my life, I've tied back to judo as being the number one reason why I'm successful. And I've taken the lessons that I've learned in judo and I've just turned them into my business lessons and the way I live my life. Being respectful of others, being a hard worker, having integrity, having good character, and chasing your dreams, a relentless pursuit of your dream until it happens and it becomes your reality.
I dig that. That's cool, man. You guys that tuned in today, I hope that you appreciate the gift that you've been offered. If people that achieve this level of anything, when you become a champion, there's tidbits of information there, like the one that he just gave, the visualization stuff that you can apply to anything you're doing in your life. It's a choice to do it. You can blame the place you're at on the lot you were given, or you can go do something about it. Follow his stuff. Take a peek. If you own a gym and you need some mats, check them out. Top-notch stuff. Be well. Don't be dickheads. Tell somebody you love them. Bye now.
Thanks, Mickey.
Visit our website, carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carry Trainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com. Hey man, what are you doing in the podcast room, Steve?
I'm writing a national anthem. It's going to be at folk festivals for Gunfighter Gun Oil.
Oh.
Let me tell you about Gunfighter Gun Hire. Made in the USA. Gunfighter Gun Oil, 100% synthetic. It's gonna last you, baby. Yeah. Gunfighter. gunfighter gun oh, gunfighter gunfighter.
Gonna get my lighter out. I don't have it.
It wasn't even Bob Dylan. It was like a love story.